There is a sacred intelligence that weaves through all things, a silent whisper beneath the noise, a stillness deeper than thought, a presence so vast and yet so intimate, it knows the rhythm of your breath before you take it. And in the quiet moments, when the world no longer demands your attention and the masks you wear fall softly to the floor, that presence begins to speak. Not with words, but with a knowing. Not with volume, but with depth. You are guided even in silence. There is no accident in your being here. Not in this moment, not in this life, not on this winding path that sometimes feels shrouded in mist. You did not come here to be lost. You came here to remember. To remember that your soul is never adrift, even when your mind cannot make sense of the unfolding. You came not to prove your worth, but to feel it, deeply, undeniably, within every cell of your being. You are not a mistake wrapped in flesh. You are a divine orchestration of the universe itself, unfolding exactly as you must. And yet, how often we forget. We look outward for signs, for validation, for confirmation that we are on the right path, unaware that the compass has always been internal. We ask the world for answers that only our own stillness can reveal. But let me tell you this, the silence you fear is not empty. It is full of guidance, full of grace, full of the soft pull of your own becoming. The Tao teaches that the highest good is like water, it nourishes all things without trying. So too does your soul guide you without demand. It does not push, it does not shout, it does not fight for attention. It waits. It waits in the hush between breaths, in the pause before your next thought, in the moment you surrender your striving and simply listen, not with your ears but with your being. You are guided, even when you cannot see the way, especially then. For what is guidance, if not a deep trust that life is unfolding for you, not to you? What is faith, if not surrendering the need to control what was never yours to direct? There is no map for awakening, no blueprint for spiritual return. There is only the invitation to be present with what is fully, vulnerably, and without resistance. This is the paradox of the path. The more you try to force your way toward clarity, the more you obscure it. It is not through effort that the fog lifts, but through trust. Trust that the ground beneath your feet is holy, even when it feels unstable. Trust that every detour is sacred. Trust that even the silence is a form of speech, and even the stillness is motion. The ego will tell you that you must do more, become more, fix more. But the soul whispers, you are already it. You are already home. Your only task is to remember. And in that remembering, the noise begins to soften. The fear begins to dissolve. The need to compare, to compete, to chase begins to fall away like leaves at the end of a season. Do not be fooled by the stillness. Do not interpret silence as absence. When nothing seems to be happening, everything is happening beneath the surface. Seeds take root in darkness. Stars are born in silence. And the deepest transformations occur not in the noise of becoming, but in the surrender of being. You were never abandoned. You have never been without guidance. Even in your loneliest moments, the presence has been there softly, patiently, lovingly, leading you back to yourself. You may call it God. You may call it spirit. You may call it the universe or source or simply love. It matters not the name, for the essence is the same. It is the sacred intelligence that paints the sky at dusk, that turns caterpillars into butterflies, that beats your heart without your instruction. And that same intelligence lives in you as you, guiding you even when your eyes are too full of tears to see it. The spiritual path is not a ladder you climb. It is a spiral staircase inward. Each moment of pain is not punishment, it is passage. Each moment of confusion is not a failure, it is a doorway. And each silence is not void. It is full of the divine waiting for your attention. Do not resist the quiet. Step into it. Let it wash over you like a warm tide, cleansing you of all the noise you thought was necessary to be enough. In the words of Rumi, there is a voice that doesn't use words. Listen, that voice has always been within you, beneath the commentary, beneath the identity, beneath the story. It is the voice of truth. It is the voice of love. It is the voice that says, you are not broken. You never were. You are not lost. You are becoming. You may not always feel this guidance as a clear sign. Sometimes it is just a nudge, a sensation, a peace that cannot be explained, And other times, it is only in hindsight that you will see how beautifully life was leading you all along. The detour that brought you to the right door, the heartbreak that opened you to deeper love, the silence that allowed your true voice to rise. This is the sacred paradox. You are being guided even when you feel most alone. You are being led even when the path disappears beneath your feet. Because the path is not out there, it is within. The light you seek is not at the end of some long road, it is the flame within you, steady, eternal, untouched by time or trauma. So pause, breathe. Let the noise of the world dissolve into the background and come home to the sanctuary of your soul. Let yourself be held by the silence. Let yourself be healed by the stillness. You don't need to be anything more. You don't need to go anywhere else. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are held, you are loved, you are guided, even in silence, especially in silence. Because the soul does not speak in volume, it speaks in vibration, in resonance, in presence. It speaks not to the mind, but to the heart. And if you quiet the noise long enough, you will feel it again. That ancient knowing, that sacred memory, that truth you've always carried. I am not alone. I am not forgotten. I am on the path. Even when I cannot see it, I am on the path. And that is enough. Let that be your truth today. You are guided, even in silence, always. And as you sit in the sanctuary of this moment, notice what begins to emerge when you release the need to name, to label, to understand. There is a sacredness in not knowing, in allowing the mystery to be the teacher, in bowing to the infinite intelligence that guides without explanation. The caterpillar does not analyze the mechanics of metamorphosis. It simply dissolves, trusting that the wings will come. So too must we learn to dissolve not into despair, but into trust. Trust is not passive. It is not a resignation. It is a fierce, unwavering affirmation that even when you cannot see the shore, the current knows the way. It is the soul's steady gaze beyond the waves of emotion, beyond the doubt, beyond the transient shadows of fear. And when you live in trust, life ceases to be a series of problems to solve and becomes a rhythm to move with a sacred dance, choreographed by the same hands that orchestrate the stars. You do not have to force alignment. You return to it. Just as a river always returns to the ocean, so too does your soul always find its way back to source. It may meander, it may stumble, it may slow to a trickle, but the pull is inevitable. That pull you feel when you are still, that gentle ache in your chest that arises not from pain, but from remembering this is your compass. Follow it not with logic, but with reverence. The world will often ask you to explain yourself, to justify your joy, to defend your peace. But your peace needs no defense. It is the natural state of your being, buried beneath layers of conditioning and noise. You don't need to become peaceful, you need only to stop waging war on the present moment. Every time you surrender the need to control, you unclench the fist of the ego and open the palm of your spirit. And what you will find in that open palm is not weakness, but unimaginable strength. The kind of strength that bends like the willow and never breaks. The kind of strength that chooses love over fear, softness over armor, stillness over noise. This is not the strength the world rewards, but it is the strength that sets you free. Freedom, true freedom, is not the ability to do whatever you want. It is the ability to be fully yourself, unapologetically and unafraid, in a world that is constantly trying to shape you. It is standing in your truth when it trembles. It is speaking from your soul when the world only hears volume. It is walking through the fire of doubt and emerging with a heart that still chooses to open. And make no mistake, your heart will be tested, not because life is cruel, but because love wants to stretch itself through you. Each crack in your armor is an opening for the light to enter. Each moment you are brought to your knees is an invitation to rise, not with resistance, but with reverence. You are not meant to go around the pain, you are meant to walk through it with presence, to gather the wisdom hidden in its ashes. There is no lesson that arrives empty. Each one is wrapped in a sacred silence, asking only that you unwrap it with care. Do not rush the lesson. Do not demand it arrive on your timeline. Some truths take seasons to bloom. Some awakenings arrive not as thunderclaps, but as whispers carried on the wind. And yet, even when you can't hear them, even when you feel abandoned or unseen, the guidance continues. like the moon pulling the tides. The unseen forces of love and grace move you forward. You may feel still, but you are growing. You may feel lost, but you are being repositioned. You may feel broken, but you are being broken open, not apart. There is a divine choreography at play here, far beyond the reach of human understanding. And your role is not to master it, but to move with it, to trust the rhythm, to surrender the need for perfection, to live in tune with the deeper melody that plays beneath the visible. This melody has no lyrics, and yet it speaks. It calls you back again and again to the truth of who you are. You are not here to survive the day. You are here to remember the eternal. You are not here to echo the noise. You are here to become the silence that holds it. You are not here to chase the light. You are here to remember you have always been it. Let this knowing take root in you. Let it rise, not as a thought, but as a felt sense, a frequency, a remembering, not of something you learned, but of something you've always known. When all else falls away, when the structures crumble, when the definitions dissolve, what remains? Presence, truth, love. And in that holy trio, you find the most sacred guidance of all, not a direction, but a destination within. Not a map, but a homecoming. You are being guided, beloved soul, not to somewhere else, but deeper into yourself. The journey is inward, and inward is infinite. And when you finally rest in that sacred inwardness, when the clamor of expectations fades into the background like distant thunder, you will begin to feel something ancient rising, not new, but newly remembered. It is the essence of who you are, beneath every mask you've worn, every role you've played, every wound you've mistaken for identity. There is a holiness in this unveiling, a kind of quiet exaltation that requires no witness, no celebration, only your presence. It is the moment the seed knows it is not separate from the forest, the moment the wave surrenders its edge and remembers it has always been the sea. You've been taught to chase your destiny as if it were somewhere outside of you, hidden in achievements, waiting in approval, buried in the applause of others. But the truth is far less dramatic and infinitely more miraculous. Your destiny is not out there. It is right here, in the breath you are taking, in the sensation of being alive, in the sacred stillness that has carried you through storms you thought would break you. You are not meant to find your purpose in some far-off place. You are meant to be your purpose wherever you are. And this being is not passive. It is the most active, courageous thing you can do in a world addicted to performance. To be who you are, not who you've been conditioned to be. Not who you think will be loved. Not the version of yourself that fits the mold, but who you are in your sacred rawness is the boldest act of all. And it is here, in this act of sacred authenticity, that the guidance becomes undeniable. Because you are no longer following a path laid out by others. You are following the quiet pulse of your own divinity. You begin to see life not as something to conquer, but as something to collaborate with. You cease waging war with reality and begin to soften into alignment. Alignment not with ideas, but with essence. You start to hear the subtle instructions of spirit, not as commands, but as gentle urgings that nudge your heart forward when your mind hesitates. You no longer demand signs because your entire life becomes a sign. A sign that you are where you're meant to be, not because everything is perfect, but because your presence is whole. And what is presence, if not the meeting place of heaven and earth? What is presence, if not the altar where your human longing bows before divine completion? In presence, there is no striving. There is only seeing. There is only feeling. There is only allowing life to speak in its true language, energy, frequency, vibration. And the more present you become, the more fluent you become in this language. You begin to understand the wind, the silence, the way your chest rises and falls when you are finally at peace. This is the conversation of the cosmos, and it is always happening within you. No one else can walk your path. They can walk beside you. They can offer their wisdom, their love, their light. But the terrain is yours, and so is the map. And so is the inner compass that never stops pointing toward your highest self. That compass is quiet. It will never compete with the volume of fear, but it will never leave you. It will wait, patient as the moon, until you are ready to look within instead of around. And when you do, when you finally stop looking outside for the answers that can only rise from your own soul, you will meet yourself in a way that transcends words. not as a concept, not as an identity, but as an awareness, as presence itself, as the field in which all things move, and yet which itself is unmoved. This is your power, not in force, not in argument, but in stillness. Stillness, so deep it reflects the stars. Stillness so alive it births new realities. Stillness that doesn't merely endure the chaos, it blesses it, knowing that nothing is outside the dance of the divine. In this stillness, guidance is no longer something you ask for. It is something you live from. You become the guidance. You become the voice. You become the peace you once pleaded for, because you have returned to yourself. And when you return to yourself, the world returns to harmony around you, not because it changes, but because you do. You see through new eyes. You hear the same music, but with a heart tuned to love instead of fear. You hold space, not because you were taught to, but because your essence is now spacious. This is what healing truly means, not fixing the self, but releasing everything that kept you from seeing your wholeness. And so, my dear soul, linger here. Stay in this space a little longer. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts fall like leaves returning to the earth. Let the truth you've always known rise through the cracks in your doubt. You are not broken. You are breaking open. You are not lost. You are being reoriented toward the infinite. You are not waiting for guidance. You are the guidance made flesh, the whisper of the sacred walking in human form, and the silence you feared is not silence at all. It is the voice of God speaking in your own heartbeat. And as this recognition deepens, as it begins to breathe itself into every corner of your being, something within you shifts quietly, not with fanfare, not with sudden transformation, but with the subtle gravity of a planet finding its perfect orbit. You begin to live not from fear or striving, but from alignment. Not from the mind's frantic urgency to figure it all out, but from the soul's patient knowing that everything, yes, everything, is unfolding in perfect rhythm. You no longer chase the future like a mirage on the horizon, because you realize that the present moment holds the only doorway to eternity. The past dissolves its grip on your identity. The future no longer looms as a question mark of your worth. You are not waiting for your life to begin. You are inhabiting it now, fully, reverently, with the awareness that this moment, this breath, is the miracle you once prayed for from afar. You stop trying to hold it all together because you finally understand that the universe never needed your grip. It only needed your trust. And trust, true trust, does not mean you will always feel safe or certain. It means you will always feel guided, even when the ground quakes, even when the map disintegrates, even when your carefully laid plans fall like sand through your fingers. You begin to see these not as signs of failure, but as sacred corrections, cosmic recalibrations moving you from the path of ego to the path of soul. You begin to bow to what is, not out of resignation, but out of reverence. Reverence for the mystery that pulses through each experience, weaving meaning where the mind only sees mess. Reverence for the intelligence that choreographs your pain and your peace with equal precision, guiding you not toward comfort, but toward awakening. And as your awareness expands, you stop asking life to be easier and start asking for your soul to be clearer. You stop asking for the path to be paved and start asking for your feet to be strengthened. You stop pleading for the noise to quiet and begin finding sanctuary within the stillness you carry. It is here in this shift that your life begins to mirror your being. No longer a collection of tasks and to-dos, but an ongoing sacred dialogue between your human form and the divine presence living through it. And that presence does not need credentials. It does not require titles. It does not wait for permission. It is as alive in your breath as it is in the trees, in the laughter of a child, in the soft light of morning breaking through the curtain. It speaks not in commands, but in invitations. It invites you to slow down, to feel, to see again with innocent eyes, to walk not as someone trying to arrive, but as someone who knows they are already home. This is the holy simplicity that lies on the other side of all you're seeking. Not a life free of challenges, but a life lived in congruence with the eternal truth of who you are. And who you are is not a resume of achievements. You are not your mistakes. You are not your losses. You are not even your personality. You are the field in which all those things appear. You are the silent watcher, the luminous space, the awareness behind the eyes that sees without judgment, that loves without condition. And when you begin to live from this place, even the smallest things take on divine significance. Washing the dishes becomes a sacred ritual. A conversation becomes a communion. A walk in the park becomes a prayer. Because you're no longer doing these things to get somewhere, you are inhabiting them fully, allowing life to move through you, breathe through you, love through you. You stop trying to prove you're enough, and you start living as if you've always been, because you have. Because the source that created galaxies and carved rivers into mountains did not make a single mistake when it made you. You are the only version of you that exists in all of time. Your presence here is not incidental, it is intentional. And your unique vibration, your frequency, your essence, it is needed. Not the curated version, not the polished persona, but the raw, real, radiant truth of your being. When you embody that truth, you become a living permission slip for others to do the same. You don't just heal yourself. You become a healing presence in the lives of others simply by being. Not by teaching, not by fixing, but by embodying. And in this embodiment, you stop looking for guidance like a lost traveler. You begin to walk as a lighthouse, firm, illuminated, anchored, not because you have all the answers, but because you have found peace with the questions. And in that peace, you become a quiet revolution in a world addicted to noise. You begin to speak less and listen more, not just to others, but to the quiet promptings within. You begin to recognize that every discomfort is an invitation, every trigger a teacher, every wound a window back to your wholeness. You start to honor your emotions not as enemies, but as messengers from the soul. And in doing so, you liberate yourself from the prison of performance. The path is not linear. It never was. It spirals inward, always inward. And as you walk it layer by layer, illusion by illusion, you begin to notice that the center has always been unchanged. Unscarred, unshaken. There is a place in you that the world has never touched. It is from this place that your deepest wisdom arises. It is from this place that your true life begins. So lean into it. Let the old identities crumble. Let the striving cease. Let the silence speak its sacred truth. You are not waiting for guidance. You are remembering that you are the very essence of it. You are guided not because you are certain, but because you are surrendered. Not because the future is clear, but because your soul is. And in that clarity, you will find everything you thought you had to chase. And now, as the quiet presence within you becomes more than a concept, more than something you visit in rare moments of stillness, but rather the very dwelling place of your awareness, something begins to unfold with the majesty of a sunrise no one else saw but you. A sacred intimacy develops between you and existence itself. You start to feel the gentle choreography of the unseen, how even the pauses and delays, the long nights and unanswered prayers were part of the divine timing that your soul knew all along. There is a slow and holy beauty in surrendering to this rhythm, a beauty that does not clamor to be seen. It does not shout for recognition. It hums, it breathes, it pulses beneath every heartbeat. It's the beauty of knowing you are not separate from life, but an expression of it. The wind through the trees is your breath. The movement of the river is your own unfolding. The ache in your chest is not emptiness. It is space being made for something greater to be born. And in that birth, the ego begins to soften, not die, but dissolve into usefulness. It is no longer the ruler, but the servant. No longer the identity you cling to, but the mask you wear with awareness, knowing you are not the mask. You stop demanding that others mirror your worth, because your worth no longer seeks its reflection. It shines of its own accord, with a quiet self-assurance that needs no validation. The soul doesn't need to shout that it exists. It simply exists, and in its existence, it sanctifies everything it touches. You begin to walk through the world differently, not above it, not detached, but deeply rooted in it. Like a tree that knows its strength comes not from height, but from the depth of its roots. You engage not to win, but to witness. You love not to be loved, but because love has become the natural outpouring of who you are. This love does not seek to possess or persuade. It blesses. It allows. It sees clearly. It no longer needs the world to behave a certain way for you to feel whole. And from this place, this ground of being, this sacred rootedness, you become aware of how little you actually need. Not in the sense of poverty or asceticism, but in the abundance of inner fulfillment. You no longer chase peace, you are peace. You no longer chase joy, you allow joy to rise like steam from a quiet lake in early morning light. You no longer search for clarity outside yourself, you begin to hear the voice of wisdom rising from the deep wells of stillness within you. And that voice, that ever-present inner guidance, it does not scold or demand. It does not offer certainty in the way the mind wants it. It offers a deeper knowing, one that cannot be proven but also cannot be denied. It comes not in explanations but in resonance, not in plans but in presence. It speaks not in complete answers but in complete peace, and you recognize its language not because you learned it but because you were born fluent in it. You simply forgot. So you begin to remember, not in the way of accumulating new beliefs but by letting go of everything that never belonged to you. The shame, the pressure, the armor, the noise. And with each release you feel lighter, not because life has changed, but because your relationship to life has become sacred again. You begin to honor the ordinary. The steam rising from your morning cup becomes incense. The sound of your own footsteps becomes a hymn. The space between your thoughts becomes a temple. You live in reverence, not because you've found a religion, but because you've returned to a way of being where everything is holy, every mistake, every embrace, every moment of breath and breaking. And in this holiness, you no longer fear the silence. You crave it, not as an escape, but as a reunion. You no longer fill the space with noise to avoid yourself. You sit in the space because you have come home to yourself. You no longer ask life to entertain or distract you. You ask only that it continue to reveal you to you. And it does. With every inhale, it reminds you that you are alive by design. With every exhale, it invites you to let go of the illusion that you must earn your right to be. With every still moment, it whispers, you are already there. The journey, you realize, is not linear. It is vertical. It does not take you forward, it takes you deeper. Deeper into truth, deeper into presence, deeper into the unspeakable wonder of being a soul having this very human, fragile, miraculous experience. You begin to look back at your life not with regret, but with awe. You see how the pain refined you, how the longing shaped you, how the waiting tempered you. You begin to see even your suffering as sacred compost, fertilizing the soil of your becoming. Nothing was wasted, not a single tear, not a single detour, not a single night spent questioning your worth. All of it was carving space in you for grace to dwell, and now that grace is overflowing. Not because you added anything to yourself, but because you peeled back the layers that once told you you were not enough. Now the layers are falling. Now the light is pouring in. And now, perhaps for the first time, you can stand in the fullness of your being. Look at your life, not with criticism, but with compassion, and say, I see now. I was never alone. I was never off course. I was always guided, even in silence. And so now, in this final stretch of unfolding, as the echoes of stillness resonate more loudly than the clamor of the world, you find yourself standing not at the end of a road, but at the beginning of an entirely new way of being. Not a new version of you, but the unveiled essence, the you that was always waiting beneath the noise, beneath the striving, beneath the desperate need to become what you already are. This is not a destination. It is a dimension of awareness, a realm where you are no longer defined by your scars, your roles, or your performance, but by your unshakable connection to the source that formed you. You no longer live as the one seeking the light, you live as the light. You no longer search for truth, you rest as the truth. You no longer beg for answers, you breathe in silence and know you are being carried. The burden of proof has been lifted from your shoulders. You do not need to be understood. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to keep proving your sacredness to a world that often cannot see its own. You have awakened to the truth that you are not here to conform, you are here to transform, not by force, but by the quiet power of being fully present, fully alive, and fully surrendered. And now, as you move through your life, not above it, not around it, but within it, you begin to see with eyes that no longer distort. You begin to love with a heart no longer hardened by judgment. You begin to offer your presence like a sacred balm to a world starved for authenticity. There is no effort in this. Giving it is the natural overflow of a being who has returned to wholeness. You meet pain not as an enemy, but as a guest. You greet uncertainty not as chaos, but as potential. You welcome endings not with fear, but with reverence. for you understand now that what falls away was never meant to stay. The path does not grow narrower as you go. It becomes more expansive, more luminous, more deeply rooted in peace. You walk with the quiet dignity of one who has met the eternal and recognized it as the face of their own soul. And in this recognition, everything becomes holy. The way you hold a gaze, the way you speak a name, the way you stand still in the face of noise and do not flinch. You are not posturing anymore. You are not performing. You are not adjusting your light to be palatable. You are radiating from the center of your truth, unfiltered, undefended, and unafraid. Because now you know, not as an idea, not as a hope, but as a felt, breathed, embodied knowing. You are guided. Even when the road is empty, even when the voice within you is a whisper buried beneath waves of doubt, even when the sky goes dark and the stars hide their face, you are guided. Not by chance, not by logic, but by the infinite intelligence that moves oceans, splits seeds, paints sunsets across galaxies, and chose to live as you for a brief, exquisite moment in time. You are not here to chase purpose. You are here to become it, and you do. The moment you let go of needing life to be anything other than what it is, and choose instead to meet it with reverence. To bow to the ordinary as sacred. To listen when silence speaks. To trust when nothing makes sense. To walk not because you know where you're going, but because you trust the one who walks with you. This is the revolution. This is the return. The dissolving of the seeker into the sought. The end of becoming. The beginning of being. And being is enough. So now, beloved, inhale this moment as if it were eternity, and exhale every illusion that ever said you were not it. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to earn. You have arrived, not at a finish line, but at yourself. And what a holy home you are. Walk on, not faster, not louder, but truer. Let the world spin. Let the winds change. You are stillness. You are presence. You are love remembering itself. You are guided. Even even in silence. There is a whisper within you that has always been there. Before you were named, before you were taught, before you were shaped by the hands of the world, there was a voice not of sound but of knowing. It did not shout, it did not demand. It simply existed like the breath in your lungs, like the tide drawn silently toward the moon. That whisper is God. And God speaks not in thunderclaps, not in doctrines, not in the noise of striving minds, but in the soft pulse of intuition. You were born with this compass. It did not need to be installed or earned. It is not given only to the special or the holy. It is woven into the very fabric of your being, a sacred GPS from the divine that guides not with maps, but with feelings, a sense, a knowing, a subtle tug in the direction of your soul's path. And yet, we doubt it. We silence it. We override it with logic, with fear, with voices not our own. We learn to trust everything but ourselves. But the soul is patient. It waits beneath the noise. It watches quietly as we search outside for answers that live within. It watches us pray for signs while ignoring the ones rising like warmth in our chest. It watches us chase approval when what we really seek is alignment. And still, it does not condemn. It waits, because that's what love does. It waits to be remembered. Intuition is not a guess. It is not a hunch. It is not the byproduct of luck or chance. It is the language of spirit. It is the way God moves in you, not as command, but as invitation. The Tao calls it the way. Jesus called it the kingdom within. Rumi called it the voice that doesn't use words. Whatever the name, the truth remains. There is something in you that knows. It knows when to stay. It knows when to go. It knows when to speak, and when silence is the deeper answer. It does not debate. It does not explain itself. It simply arrives and waits for your trust. But trust is not something we were taught to give ourselves. We were taught to analyze, to evaluate, to outsource our knowing to others with louder voices or shinier titles. We were taught that wisdom wears robes or degrees or microphones. But what if the wisest teacher you will ever know is the quiet presence inside you? The one who knows what your soul came here to express long before the world told you what you should achieve. To follow your intuition is to return to yourself. To reclaim the sacred agreement you made before you arrived in this body. It is to say, I trust the knowing in me more than the opinions around me. It is to walk not by sight, but by presence. There will be times this path feels irrational, illogical. There will be times it looks like you're walking away from opportunity, from safety, from what others call success. But the soul is not here to follow maps drawn by fear. It is here to walk the sacred, often invisible path of truth. And truth is rarely convenient, but it is always liberating. The ego wants guarantees. It wants proof. It wants to know where every step will lead before it takes the first. But intuition asks for faith. Not blind faith, but embodied faith. The kind that says, I may not know where this road ends, but I know I am being guided. And isn't that what freedom really is? Not certainty, but surrender. God doesn't need to speak in burning bushes or part seas to get your attention. God is already speaking in the unease you feel when you betray yourself, in the joy that rises when you follow your calling, in the synchronicities that seem too precise to be coincident, in the still voice that says this is right when everything else says play it safe. That is God, not out there, in here. You don't need to earn divine communication. You don't need to chant it into being or fast for 40 days. You only need to listen. And listening is not about ears, it is about stillness, about tuning the dial inward, about valuing the signal over the static. So be still, be quiet. Let the world spin without dragging you into its chaos. Listen not with effort, but with surrender. And what you will hear is not instruction, it is remembrance. You will remember who you were before the world convinced you to forget. You will remember that you are not separate from the source that created you. You are an expression of it. And that source has never stopped speaking. You've only stopped believing that you are worthy of its voice. But you are. You are not an accident, fumbling through chance. You are a divine intention, unfolding with sacred precision. And every intuitive nudge, every gut feeling, every deep yes and sacred no is a breadcrumb on your path back to your own light. You are not here to conform to the noise. You are here to embody the stillness. And from that stillness, you will create. You will love. You will serve, not because you're striving, but because you're aligned. So trust what you know, even when it makes no sense to anyone else, especially then, because your soul did not come here to be understood by minds conditioned in fear. It came here to be lived fully, freely, fearlessly. Let intuition be your guide, not your backup plan. Let it lead, not follow. Let it speak louder than the world's fear and softer than its noise, because that is how God speaks. Not in the storm, but in the silence that follows. And in that silence, may you hear the sacred truth. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not waiting for your path. You are already on it. And your intuition is the sound of God walking with you. There is no map more sacred than the pull within your own chest. No scripture more immediate than the feeling that arises before thought tries to name it. You do not need to consult the stars when the constellations are already carved into the silence behind your breath. Intuition is not a faculty of the mind. It is the language of the eternal, passed from the infinite into the still waters of your being. And yet, how often we turn from it, as if the still small voice could not possibly hold more wisdom than the loudness of the world. But let me tell you this, the world has never known what your soul came here to become. It has opinions, yes, but not insight. It has commentary, but not clarity. Only in that sacred stillness will you hear the truth that needs no justification. There will be moments in your life when logic tells you one thing and your spirit pulls another. And it is in those moments that the divine is inviting you to remember where you come from. You are not here to live a life so predictable that your soul forgets it is alive. You are here to dance with mystery, to follow the wind even when the destination is unclear, to say yes to the path not because it is proven but because it is yours. And in that yes, you enter into covenant with the infinite. A covenant that says, I trust the deeper rhythm of life more than the temporary comfort of safety. Do not mistake ease for alignment. Sometimes the intuitive path is narrow. Sometimes it requires letting go of hands you thought you'd hold forever. Sometimes it invites you to walk alone, not as punishment, but as purification. The soul is not here to accumulate applause. It is here to remember its light and live it, even when no one else sees the glow. And when you dare to follow the whisper, When you dare to say yes to that which has no name but feels like home, you begin to experience a kind of grace that cannot be explained. Doors open without being knocked upon. The right words find you when you stop rehearsing. People appear not because you chased them, but because you became a match for what your soul was calling in. This is not magic. This is not luck. This is alignment. And alignment happens when you allow God to be more than a concept. When you let God live through you, not as doctrine, but as direction. Not as something to worship from afar, but as something to embody from within. You see, God does not shout commands from the clouds. God flows as your longing. God rises as your intuition. God is the breath that whispers, go here, when no one else understands why. And if you listen with the ears of your soul and not the noise of your mind, you will know. You will not need to justify. You will not need to defend. You will simply walk in truth, and that truth will set your spirit free. And yes, there will be resistance, not from your soul, but from the parts of you that have been trained to distrust yourself. The voices of the past, the echoes of old wounds, the ghosts of should and must and don't you dare. But even they, when met with compassion, will quiet, because fear cannot stand in the presence of remembered divinity. And when you remember that your soul is not separate from God, that your intuition is not inferior, but sacred, that your knowing is not delusion, but direction, then you return, not to a new place, but to the place you never left, the core of your being, the home of your spirit, the temple within where God has been whispering all along. You may ask, how do I know if it's intuition or fear? And the answer is not in analysis, it's in feeling. Fear screams. Intuition whispers. Fear contracts. Intuition expands. Fear hurries. Intuition is patient. The more still you become, the more easily you will feel the difference. Because the voice of God will never shame you into change. It will not manipulate. It will not coerce. It will only call. And that call may not always make sense to the mind, but it will always make peace in the heart. Peace not as the absence of challenge, but as the deep knowing that you are walking in step with something eternal. So when the nudge comes, honor it. When the quiet no arises, respect it. When the gentle this way rises up from the belly of your being, follow it. Even when it leads you away from logic, even when it contradicts the advice of those who love you, especially then, because no one else can live your soul's path but you. No one else can interpret the language of your intuition. It is coded specifically for your journey, tailored by the divine for your unfolding. And let this truth settle into your bones. You are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. The only distance between you and the life your soul longs for is the space between ignoring and honoring your inner knowing. And when you close that gap, when you say yes to the soft voice that has never stopped speaking, you will remember what freedom feels like. Not the freedom of having it all figured out, but the freedom of being fully yourself, unapologetically, intuitively, divinely guided. Let the world chase its noise. Let others run toward the approval of those who have forgotten their own souls. But you are being called inward. You are being called home, to the center, to the silence, to the place where God speaks not in fire or thunder, but in the simple, sacred sound of your own intuitive heart. And when you begin to live by this voice not once, not occasionally, but as your natural rhythm, you will notice that life no longer feels like a riddle to be solved, but a river to be trusted. The struggle to control, to plan, to predict will start to dissolve like mist at sunrise, because you will have realized that certainty is not what your soul was after. It was never control that gave you peace. It was connection. And intuition is the sacred thread that ties you to the infinite, not as a subject, but as a participant in divine orchestration. You are not here to calculate every step. You are not here to forecast every outcome. You are here to respond to the wind that moves through your spirit and says this way, and sometimes that way leads into the unknown, into the valley where the map ends. But the unknown is not your enemy. It is the canvas of God. It is where the sacred shows its face, not in definition, but in presence. And in those spaces where the mind panics, the soul exhales, because it knows something the intellect never could, that life is not about building a fortress. It's about opening a gate. When you live from intuition, you stop seeking signs from the sky and start honoring the signs inside. the subtle unease that rises in certain rooms, the clarity that floods in unexpected moments, the relief you feel when you finally speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. These are not accidents. They are alignment. They are God speaking not in language, but in resonance. And to live this way is to become fluent in the holy, not in reciting texts, but in embodying them. This embodiment does not come through striving, it comes through surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of illusion. The illusion that you must earn your guidance. The illusion that wisdom only arrives with age or authority. But the child knows things the adult forgets. The bird does not analyze the wind before it flies. The tree does not doubt its right to bloom. And you were never meant to question the voice that was placed in you by the very hands that crafted the galaxies. So listen as you breathe. Trust as you walk. There is no greater prayer than presence, no greater obedience than authenticity, and no greater offering to the world than a soul who has decided to live according to the sacred instructions etched quietly into their own heart. Let your life be that prayer. There will come a day when the world grows quiet, not because it has silenced itself, but because you have ceased to ask it for answers. You awake not in panic, not in the fever of ambition, but in a stillness so deep, so ancient, that it feels like being reunited with the first breath you ever took. It is there in that timeless calm that intuition becomes not just a guide, but a companion. A sacred presence walking with you, no longer needing to prove its worth or make itself loud. And in that moment, you realize it was never guidance. You lacked it was trust. Trust not in the world, not in fate, but in your own divine knowing. And as you begin to trust, not with trembling hesitation, but with the sureness of one who remembers where they came from, life starts to unfold differently. You stop measuring your worth by accomplishments. You stop comparing your timeline with anyone else's. You start to understand that the path you are walking is not linear, it is spiral, it is sacred, and it is your own. You are no longer seduced by the rush, by the mirage of someday, by the pressure to have it all mapped out. Because you feel it now, don't you? That deep, gentle unfolding that requires nothing but your attention, that current beneath the surface, flowing with a love too vast to explain, too present to deny. It doesn't ask you to fix yourself. It doesn't ask you to prove your readiness. It simply asks you to listen. And as you listen, things begin to fall away. The need to be understood, the fear of missing out, the urge to chase what never felt right to begin with. It all dissolves like shadows at dawn when you let your life be directed not by the echoes of the past, but by the living truth arising in each breath. You start to see that intuition is not just a tool for decision-making, it is the living language of your soul. It is how the divine moves through you, how the infinite shapes your path, not from a distance, but from within. And the more you obey this inner knowing, the more life meets you with grace. Not always in ways you expect. Sometimes the doors close, sometimes the detour appears, sometimes what you thought you wanted falls apart. But now, you no longer see this as failure. You see it as realignment. You understand that intuition is not here to appease your ego. It is here to fulfill your soul. And the soul does not need comfort to grow. It needs truth. It needs silence. It needs space. And most of all, it needs your presence. So be present, not to fix, not to force, but to feel. Let the moment be your teacher. Let the pause between your plans be the place where your greatest guidance arises. You don't need to go out and get more. You need to go within and hear more. There, in the sanctuary of your spirit, you will hear what the world cannot tell you. That you are guided even in your confusion, loved even in your fear, held even when you feel alone. That voice you sometimes doubt, it is older than time. It is wiser than logic. It is the echo of the divine reminding you that every part of your journey, even the messy, uncertain parts, is holy. And if ever you begin to stray, if ever you forget and begin again to seek your answers outside, the voice will still be there, waiting, unmoved, unwounded, because truth is eternal. Because God never withdraws from the temple of your being. And your intuition, your sacred, ever-present compass, is proof that you have never, not for a single breath, been without guidance. And as you walk deeper into this awareness, a new way of being begins to take root, not imposed, not rehearsed, but revealed. You no longer seek to dominate the day or conquer your tasks like a soldier at war. Instead, you rise with reverence, as one who knows that the ordinary is infused with the extraordinary, that the mundane is drenched in the sacred. The first breath upon waking becomes a communion. The simple act of placing your feet upon the floor becomes a blessing. And with every movement, every word, every moment of quiet attention, you begin to align not with the expectations of the world, but with the rhythm of your own soul. This is not passive living. This is powerful surrender. It is the kind of strength that does not shout. It does not need to convince. It simply is rooted, unwavering, immovable as a mountain, because it is no longer identified with the ever-changing winds of opinion and circumstance. Intuition becomes your foundation, not because it always shows you the clearest route, but because it always points you toward truth. And truth is not a straight line. It bends, it meanders. It leads you through valleys that others avoid. It tests your patience, your faith, your trust in what cannot be seen. But in those unseen spaces, in those invisible turns, you meet the deeper parts of yourself, the parts that were buried under years of striving, masked behind the image of who you thought you needed to be. And something miraculous begins to happen. You soften, not into weakness, but into wisdom. You stop needing to protect yourself from the world, because you realize the world cannot take what you no longer cling to. You let go not of your dreams, but of your insistence on how they must unfold. You let go of urgency, because urgency was the language of fear. You let go of needing to be ahead, because ahead was always a mirage. And in this letting go, you do not lose yourself, you find yourself. You return to the place you never truly left, the center of your being, where intuition and divinity speak in the same voice. And from this place of knowing, your life begins to change, not in spectacle, but in substance. You no longer need to chase. You attract not by effort, but by essence. You stop auditioning for love, and instead become the presence that invites love to rise in others. You speak not to be heard, but to express the overflow of alignment. You create not to impress, but to reveal what is already whole within you. And everything you do becomes an extension of your connection with Source. Every decision becomes a prayer. Every action becomes a form of listening, because you are no longer the one making life happen. You are the one allowing life to move through you. And even in difficulty, yes, especially in difficulty, you lean into intuition like a hand reaching out in the dark. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what truth is trying to find me here? You stop fighting what is and instead become curious. You let the pain speak, not as punishment, but as portal, because your soul knows what your mind forgets, that the path of intuition does not lead you around your wounds, but straight through them. And it is there, in the very center of your ache, that the voice of God often speaks the loudest, not in volume, but in clarity. And so you begin to trust not just the voice within, but the unfolding of your entire journey. You no longer see delays as denials. You no longer see closed doors as failures. You see divine timing at work, orchestrating a life you could never have planned but were always meant to live. You become less reactive, more receptive, less anxious, more attuned, less in need of outcomes, more in love with the process. And in this space, life begins to whisper its secrets, not because you demanded them, but because you became quiet enough to hear. This is the grace of intuition. It doesn't rush, it doesn't beg, it doesn't force. It simply invites you back again and again to the stillness that never left. And when you live from that stillness, you become a different presence in the world. You are no longer seeking to be something. You are radiating what you already are. And that is where the real transformation begins, not in effort, but in remembrance. Not in striving, but in surrender. Not in becoming, but in being. There comes a moment in the journey, often unnoticed, when you no longer need to be convinced that you are guided, you simply know. Not because the path is free of difficulty, but because your inner compass no longer wavers in the face of uncertainty. You trust not because everything makes sense, but because everything feels aligned. You are not waiting for the universe to prove itself to you. You are moving in harmony with it. And this is the quiet miracle of intuition. It transforms your relationship with life itself. You begin to feel the difference between momentum and movement. You no longer equate busyness with purpose. You sense the weight in your body when something is off. You recognize the heaviness in a yes spoken when your heart meant no, and you honor it. You make room for it. You no longer shame yourself for not fitting the mold. You see now that the mold was never meant for you. It was designed by those who forgot how to listen to their own soul's music. But you are listening now, and what you hear is sacred. It comes not in perfect sentences, but in sensations. A calm that enters a room before words are spoken. A subtle stirring when your spirit brushes against something true. A knowing that rises up like a tide when your feet finally touch the ground that was meant for you. This is how the divine speaks, not with fanfare, but with familiarity. You recognize the voice not because it is loud, but because it feels like home. And in this sacred remembering, you no longer need to chase experiences for validation. You no longer seek the next thrill to feel alive. Your aliveness is not dependent on externals. It is rooted in the eternal. It is anchored in the awareness that every breath is enough. That presence is not just a practice, it is a portal. When you are present, the veil between the seen and unseen begins to thin. The moment becomes alive with intelligence. The breeze carries messages. The sunlight feels like a conversation. Even the silence has a texture, a weight, a warmth. You begin to understand that the goal was never to reach a destination. The goal was to wake up within the journey itself. To be so attuned to your inner voice that you no longer fear making the wrong turn because every path becomes part of the becoming. Even your missteps carry medicine. Even your detours deepen the devotion. You are not failing when things fall apart. You are being refined. You are being stripped of what was never truly yours. And in the ashes of what once was, the voice of intuition becomes even clearer, even purer, even more sacred. And so, when the mind begins to spiral, when the fear begins to claw, when the world's noise grows louder than your own heartbeat, you remember to pause, to return, to breathe. Not as a technique, but as a ceremony, a holy act of reconnection. You do not need to escape. You only need to re-enter yourself, your body, your breath, this moment. Because the voice you seek has never left. It has simply been waiting for you to turn your face inward again. And as you make this return again and again, something within you begins to change. You stop asking for signs that you are on the right path because you feel it in your bones. You stop doubting whether your steps are enough because each one is guided by something older than time. You become your own sanctuary. Your presence becomes your practice. And in that presence, the world begins to soften. Not because it changes, but because your vision clears. You see beauty where you once saw burden. You feel grace where you once felt lack. You hear God not as a voice booming from the heavens, but as the quiet unfolding of every moment lived in truth. And this is what it means to live intuitively, not to float above life, but to enter it fully. Not to escape, but to embody. Not to be perfect, but to be profoundly real. Real enough to listen. Real enough to trust. Real enough to follow the thread of your own becoming, even when the path disappears beneath your feet. Because intuition does not promise ease, it promises alignment. It does not guarantee safety, it guarantees truth. And when you walk in truth, you walk in power. Not the power that controls, but the power that creates. You become the artist of your own becoming. Not because you force the masterpiece into existence, but because you allow the canvas of your life to be painted by the brush of divine wisdom. And now, as the river of these words approaches its silent ocean, you may begin to feel a stillness, rising a sacred hush, settling in the spaces between your thoughts. Not as an end, but as a beginning. A return not to what was, but to what always is. For this journey we've walked together was never about collecting new beliefs, but about shedding the false ones. It was never about finding new ground to stand on, but about remembering that you are the ground, the quiet, unwavering presence. Beneath every wave, every wind, every passing cloud of emotion. You no longer need to search for the voice of God in the thunder or the fire, for you have found it in the silence. You have discovered it, not in the applause of the world, but in the sacred resonance of your own intuitive heart. And what you feel now is not something I have given you, is what was always within you, waiting like an ancient seed beneath the snow, responding to the warmth of your attention. Let yourself feel this. Let yourself fully arrive here in this very breath, not as a visitor, but as the owner of this holy space within. You are not being led to something outside of yourself. You are being brought home to your own divine rhythm. And the whisper that guides you, the still small voice you've learned to trust, is not just an echo of the divine, it is the divine. flowing through your unique form, moving not ahead of you or behind you, but as you. You were never meant to live from the outside in. You were never designed to chase truth down crowded avenues of thought. You were meant to bloom from the inside out, to awaken to the eternal presence that has never left you. And now you know. Now you remember. Your steps may still be uncertain. The path may still twist and turn. But you walk now with a sacred companion, the voice within that speaks without words, the compass that never lies, the flame that never dies. There is no need to force what flows. There is no need to beg for what already belongs to you. Let the soft guidance of your intuition become your prayer. Let your silence become your sanctuary. Let your life become your offering, not polished, not perfect, but real. Let your presence be your purpose. Let your breath be your teacher. Let your knowing be enough. You are not here to impress the world. You are here to express the truth of your being. And that truth does not come from striving. It comes from listening. And what you have heard in this sacred space beyond my voice, beneath the words, is the voice of your own soul rising. Clear, gentle, unmistakable, divine. Trust it. Follow it. Let it carry you not to where you think you should go, but to where you are meant to be. And in that sacred unfolding, may you finally come to see you are not merely guided by God. You are how God speaks, and you always have been.